Hello, welcome inside a Sunday wrap-up edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Courtney Delks, Danny Riego here with you and our special guest, one of our guests for today's show, Richie Hall. We're going to spend today talking about a wild Saturday of sectional girls basketball tournaments. We're going to start with Sectional 8 today. Noblesville beating Hamilton Southeastern. I have to post regional pairings, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with an interview from Reagan Wilson from last night, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
I mean, our team loves this spotlight, loves this stage. Like, the community, the show out tonight, it's amazing, especially women's basketball, the step that it's taken in the right direction. I mean, the community, it was an awesome atmosphere. We've worked so hard for this moment, and we finished the job like we wanted to.
This group and your ability to kind of withstand some punches, not just this year, but over the course of your careers. If you could just talk about how that's all kind of come together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me and Ava as seniors, it's our last go around, let's go out with a bang. But at the same time, this team, we've been here, we've done this past 4 years, this is our third sectional. We were made for this moment. We came out here, we played together, we had fun, we got the job done.
It felt like offensively tonight, you guys are running a lot smoother than you were earlier in this season. What's been the key to kind of finding your groove on that side?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just not rushing shots, but on the other side, just having confidence. When the ball leaves our hand, we know it's going in.
MVP! You had Pike come out and come out hot in the first quarter.
Yeah.
What do you think switched their shooting?
Yeah, I mean, it was a game of runs. We knew they would get theirs and we would get ours. We knew she's a great player. She went to IU. There was no doubt in our mind she was going to get hers. But at the end of the day, we tried to stick within us and do what we did best, which ended up working out for us.
How about that play that Shoemaker made to kind of ice it for you guys, and then Tip hitting free throws too? I mean,
I tried to spotlight on Tip. Her free throw progression has been insane this season. She would even admit her free throws were not good in the beginning of the year, but she has worked her butt off to work that up, and it showed off tonight. And then Ava, hitting that clutch through at the end. She wasn't shooting well tonight, but that didn't stop her, and that's what we've been preaching at practice. Confidence, confidence, confidence. When you shoot the ball, you know it's going in.
That was Reagan Wilson, senior for the Noblesville Millers. What a game last night. Danny, I'll let you start the conversation and just your initial takeaways from last night's festivities.
Well, I didn't know you were going to lead the show with Reagan, but that is the headline. If you asked around to some of the Noblesville people, and not Donna and not anybody on the team, they didn't want Fishers. I think they wanted to dodge Fishers. And sure as ever, they get Fishers in the first time they play in the sectional, and then avenged kind of their 1-7, Reagan's 1-7 record. But Reagan didn't care who they played. Courtney keeps calling it the revenge tour, but the kid finds motivation in anything in any basketball game. And the one thing I would say about her is if you took all of the great players in this sectional, and there are a ton of great players. Reagan even mentioned, Makalewski in her own interview, but if you were drafting for the right to win one basketball game with your season on the line, with the first pick, Danny Riego takes Reagan Wilson. She just knows how to win, and she does whatever she needs to. It was, feeding Tipner in the first half on Friday night. Tonight she got 18. It was handling the basketball. But the last thing, before we kind of get Courtney's initial thoughts, my heart was pounding last night. And my palms were sweaty. It generally doesn't happen to me, but my heart was pounding. You could just tell, Reagan's heart rate was probably like a grandfather clock. You couldn't speed her up at all. The moment didn't look too big. She's made for that. And she's a big reason why they are the Sectional 8 champs and maybe the final Sectional 8 champs. So, Corey, didn't she look just calm and just like a champ last night?
Oh, there's some things that a kid just has that you can't teach, that it's just in them. And Reagan Wilson is that kid that just has that winner's mentality. We call it the compete mentality at our place. And she has it. And she always has had it. And the thing, when she came out of halftime, if you watch this, she was running sprints. She literally was like, hey, look at Reagan. She was so jacked up. She came out of halftime and started running sprints back and forth in the half court while her team's doing layups. That was the level she was on. And as you were talking about it, I got sweaty palms right here. That was freaking awesome.
Richie, what'd you make of last night's of game?
It was a blast. Yeah, and I everybody always asks, what kind of predictions of me, who do you think's going to win? Who do you think's going to win? I've learned to never make predictions because sometimes, you do that. People talk, people hear the prediction, they're like, well, I'm going to go and prove them wrong. And it's just always fun to have games where you don't know who's going to win until the final buzzer. And I think I was talking about you with this last night, Brian, is that Southeastern gets out to this great start. Maya just is on fire the first quarter. And I think in the second quarter, we were thinking that Southeastern was just going to start to run away. It felt like they should be at 5 to 7 points when the score was tied or up by 1 point. And then it was just the momentum shifts too. Like all of a sudden, Noblesville was up by 10. They go on that, I think, 13-0 run, and Southeastern comes back. And then, then it's close for the entire second quarter. Then, like Reagan mentioned, Shoemaker hits the three, Tibner makes the free throws. It's just really fun to have a game where you just don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
You mentioned that, and the way that Maya comes out, Maya Makaluski, she hits 3 3-pointers on her first 3 attempts. She's going, she's moving. And then we talked to Donna Buckley, and she said after that, Noblesville switched to a 3-2 zone, and their ability to kind of contain Maya Makaluski after letting her go off for 11 points in the first quarter was just so impressive and a huge turning point in that game. It felt like, and you could feel Noblesville kind of turning the tide. But you're right, Richie. I mean, early on and through the second quarter, it kind of felt like HSE was up by more than it was. And even as Noblesville was kind of climbing back, it's like, okay, when's Maya going to do her thing? And late in the game, too, it was like, when's Maya going to do their thing? And Noblesville just did such a good job of denying her touches and dodging that moment. And something else, too, and I wrote about this after the Valparaiso game and Reagan's role, circling back to her, Reagan's role in building up kids' confidence, like an Allie Hutchinson, and how earlier in the season she was afraid to take shots. She'd get open looks, and she'd pass it off and would pass in the moment. Well, her teammates and Reagan especially just kept building her up and saying, it's okay to take those shots. It's okay if you miss. We're going to get the rebound, and we'll go from there. And, just little things like that. And who hit the go-ahead 3-pointer last night in the second quarter? Allie Hutchinson. And it just this cool thing where she finished with 3 points. She had 2 3-pointer attempts, but she hit a huge shot. And it's cool to see the progression of kids like that. And then Ava Shoemaker, somebody who came on really strong during that state tournament round a couple of years ago, has had a really good career. I mean, she hit some huge shots. She had that floater, Courtney, that we were talking about before the show, where she went along the baseline, hit the floater. She had the 3-pointer that also helped stifle an HSE run. And then I think, and will be the next talking point, I think the coolest part of this was that Meredith Tipner was the one at the line with the chance to put that thing away or at least get some distance between them. And she hit both free throws. A kid who really struggled and is open about her struggles at the free throw line throughout the season. Tip's the one to step up, converts both free throws, stabilizes Noblesville, and helps send them on their way to a regional.
Yeah, I'm totally a math guy, and particularly when it comes to percentages in late game situations. But she's one of those kids that transcends what logic and math tell you. And I know Reagan talked about it in her interview about how she shot it better over the last couple of weeks. And I know she's been in the gym kind of working on some minor adjustments, but in the end, that's not a where's your elbow thing. How are you holding the ball? It's just her DNA to make big shots. And I've always said, outside of probably Reagan Wilson, if there's free throws that have to be made for Noblesville, big free throws late in a basketball game to ice it or win it or whatever, Meredith is a kid that I would trust at the line. And they were true last night. But, I do want to double back to something that you said, Hank, because I think it was really the key to the game schematically and on the floor was that 3-2 zone. And so Courtney and I were texting a lot about it, just kind of leading up. But we talked about it on the last pod too. They played this 1-3-1 against Fishers, sped Fishers up, turned them over, and then we questioned on whether they could do that again. I mean, this is their trademark defense, and for Donna Buckley to go to the 3-2 zone, I've seen a lot of Noblesville basketball over the last couple of years, and this year also. They don't play that thing a lot, and there were some minor adjustments too. They played it in kind of clog the middle. A lot of times when you play a 3-2 zone, you want to kind of take away the perimeter, but where Maya was, they were able to adjust in limiting her touches and her production based on where she was lined up. What they did leading up to it was really, really good by Donna Buckley. I think she needs to be shouted out for, I think she coached the best basketball game, honestly, that I had seen her coach maybe ever. And it had a lot to do with the preparation leading up to the week. But that 3-2 zone, that was tough, Courtney. That was really, really tough. And so I give a nod to Donna on that. Absolutely.
I second that. Donna's adjustment in game there to go to that 3-2 was the storyline of the game, besides, Reagan Wilson and her support cast. And what what was kind of saddening was Donna made the adjustment, and like HSC didn't make any adjustments offensively. And for anybody who's a basketball mind who was at that ball game, like you could see, like the players just didn't know what to do. Maya was down posting up in the post, like there were no screens being set to get those kids, and she goes off for 9 in the first quarter, and I think she ended with 11. Like that was
14.
So she wasn't getting into positions. KK, like I would have loved to see a high ball screen action happen for HSC. The game's over, but I mean, you got to give it to Donna and Noblesville. Like that was an amazing in-game adjustment, and there was no adjustment made on the side of HSC, and that was the difference in the ball game.
Richie and Danny, I know we've watched a lot of Noblesville over the course of this season, and Courtney too. But if watching them run offensively, and this is my final thought on the Millers, but watching them offensively, even later in the season against Zionsville, there just something wasn't quite clicking. Like I don't know if it was the chemistry, but they weren't quite gelling yet. But watching them last night, I mean, that was a smooth, well-oiled machine, and that's kind of what I was expecting to see from them late in the season against Zionsville. But you didn't really quite feel that way. But last night, it felt smooth. It felt like they were playing with a lot more confidence, and they were sharing the ball so much better than they had, I thought, than earlier in the season. Richie, I'll start with you and what you thought of just the way the offense was running.
Yeah, they were a lot more confident. In fact, that was the quote I used from Reagan, and my story was the confidence quote about Ava. You may have been struggling with shooting, but and the thing about Ava is that also she was injured for quite a bit, and that does affect a team when you lose a key player. So you have to adjust to 2 games without her, and then she comes back, and you kind of have to readjust to her coming back. It happened with Garrett Catholic when they lost their freshman to an injury too. But I also kind of felt like that Noblesville was in good hands when Ava had the ball because of that confidence, because she's also a state championship player just like Reagan was, and same thing with Meredith too. You just kind of felt like if the ball's in their hands, they at least know what to do. The shot goes in, the shot doesn't go in, but they at least knew what to do. And I also saw a lot of growth, I think, from CeCe Quigley, someone who does not have as much experience in the tournament as the other 3 do. But she seemed to get more confident too. I just saw her going for balls, getting key rebounds. I think she made a steal or 2. You could kind of just tell that Noblesville had been there before, and that the winning 3 of the last 4 sectionals, still having girls from the state championship team. You could just tell. You could just tell they just looked the part as the game went on.
Yeah, Richie, you used the word confidence. Hank, you used the word sharing. Both of them are accurate. Both of them are correct. I would also use the word connected. They seem very connected. I mean, even their timeout huddles, like they're arm in arm in their timeout huddles, like that's a connected basketball team. And not to belabor the point, but I credit Reagan and I credit Tipner, and I credit the team leaders on that team. And Ava Shoemaker is a senior, but when the ball finds Hutchinson with an opportunity to make a shot, and the ball finds Quigley, and you saw the out of bounds play when Hank played the highlights when they shot it to the weak side corner to Ava Shoemaker. There's no hesitation. These kids are catching the ball in rhythm. They're doing their work, and they're putting it on the net. And the Hutchinson 3, if you play that one through, like before Hutchinson is even on the other side getting ready for defense, Reagan Wilson is patting her on the back. So they've empowered each other to take and make big shots. And in a game like that, that's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to be Reagan's game. That's supposed to be Tipner's game. And I think, and Reagan, I celebrated her, but she wasn't perfect tonight. She wasn't perfect. She had a 5-second call. She threw it away a couple of times. I thought she had a nice little, left-handed over the head pass to Quigley that she was great, but she wasn't perfect. But all of the work that she's done to keeping that team connected and empowering everybody to take and make big shots, I think played out because she needed it tonight and she got it.
Looking now at the HSE side, and spinning it ahead, and maybe this is recency bias, prisoner moment thinking, but that kind of feels like maybe it's going to be the point for HSE that launches them into something special next year. You can see the potential there. We talk a lot about Maya, but Kayla Stidham and KK Holman, when Maya was being contained a little bit down the stretch and was dealing with some foul trouble late in the game, it was those two that picked up the torch and helped carry their team. Ant Green, who we talked about last week, had some huge plays defensively as HSE came marching back. And the way that they finished the first half, where they go on that little 5-point spurt to get him back into it. I think it was KK Holman and a 3 maybe by Kayla Stidham. And then down the stretch again, it was, I think, 2 buckets by Holman, a 3 by Stidham or a 2 by Stidham after like a little bit of chaos, and then another Holman play. But just to see those 2 players coming along, I'm really excited to see how they take that leap. And then obviously Maya and her senior season, the Miss Basketball conversation, she'll be involved in that, I'm sure. But I mean, I'm expecting special things from HSE moving forward. Courtney, what about you? What do you make of HSE?
They have all the tools, all the pieces are there. It's bringing it all together. And I agree. I think that KK and Ant Green down in both sides of the floor in that basketball game yesterday kept HSC in the game, kept them alive. They made big plays. They were splitting the zone. They were getting in there. They were making the layups. And I mean, there were a couple of bunnies that were missed that could change the outcome of that ball game. I think there was probably at least 3 or 4 layups there late that, were down and out that were all fueled by Ant and KK. And then Kayla hit that big 3. She had an off shooting night, but she had a big 3 in front of the HSC crowd. So all the pieces are there. It's bringing it all together for that team.
Richie?
Yeah. I feel bad, probably the worst for Holman, just because she had, her stats: 20 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 5 of 5 from the free throw line, which that's not bad in itself. This kind of makes me think back to 5 or 6 years ago with Hamilton Southeastern and Sydney Parish on the team. They always had the hump that was Carmel. They couldn't get past Carmel during the Amy Dilk years. But then their junior year, I think this is Sydney's junior year, something just clicked. And I think for Brian's point, yes, this might be the clicking point for next year, because Maya's going to be a senior. She's going to want to go out with a bang. But then I always think, and I kind of want to get Danny and Courtney's opinion on this too, is that something kind of changes between a sophomore and a junior year when they just start, especially if you'll be coming out as playing varsity as a freshman, something just they just suddenly figure it out. I don't know if it's an experience thing or, they just start to understand more that, hey, we've got 2 years left. We got to make the most of it. We have all this potential. But, I think that between Holman and Stidham, the 2 sophomores, and I can't Green too, I think that there's going to be hopefully the clicking moment for those 2. And because, I have to be neutral when it comes to the county teams, but they're just teams that you'd like to see just win titles, win championships. And, Southeastern does have all the pieces. So, there's just a lot of potential, and it'd be great to see them fulfill it.
Yeah, Richie, and I can confirm Richie does not like making predictions. That includes seconds before tip-off when somebody leans over and says, "Hey, Richie, who you got here?" But you're right, Richie, and you mentioned it too last night. Like, it's things we have to see one of these teams lose, and it's that way for a lot of the, almost basically all these games too. But these ones too, because it's like they're both so deserving. They both, like, HSE's body of work this year was incredible. Like that matchup, we talk about this all the time, but it's like a semi-state game. Like they're just unbelievable. Same thing as we get here in a minute to Justin Sokeland with Jennings County B&L. Same thing. That feels like it should be a game that's further in the tournament, but we got it this weekend instead. But just tip of the cap, in case we didn't mention it, but just tip of the cap to HSE for a phenomenal season and what they did. That's what, 3 or 4 losses on the year. That's nothing to stick your nose up, especially with the schedule that these teams play. Danny, we'll get your thoughts.
Yeah, Richie nailed it. I want to accentuate the point that he made about the jump that girls basketball players make from their sophomore year in high school to their junior year. There's got to be some statistical significance to that, because I've seen it way too many times for that not to be true. And so if you look at the kids that they could be returning, Stidham and Holman specifically took a big jump. When they played Noblesville earlier in the year, she played a great defensive basketball game against Reagan Wilson. But she played a great offensive basketball game here too. So you saw her growing up before your very eyes, but that kid's going to be different next year. So is Stidham. So are those other 26s that are there. But, Richie's other point, the Noblesville team still talks about, I don't want to call it a collapse because that's probably overstatement and too harsh, but letting that one go last year against Fishers in their own building, they rallied around that. That's something that they still talk about in casual conversation and sometimes in formal conversation. They use it as a motivating factor. it's never fun to lose a sectional game. It's also never fun to lose a sectional game in your own building and watch other teams take pictures. They're going to rally around this. And this is not the last we're going to talk about this game. Maybe in 365 days, we're going to revisit this one. But this could be a really good rallying cry. And Hank, to come full circle and just to repeat something that you said, maybe the start of maybe the turning point, maybe the start of something special for HSE.
Richie, a closing thought from you?
It was just a lot of fun. A lot of fun, very fun sectional for our teams up here. I do want to make sure I mention Hamilton Heights winning their fourth sectional in a row, going all the way over to Yorktown and having to tough out Jay County, who always seems to play Heights really, really well. And then, of course, Sheridan winning their second sectional title in school history, their first in 9 years. Our headline for the story is talking about how Sheridan, Kenzie Garner's a beast. 25 points, 15 rebounds, which she's been doing all year. But, those kind of stats get enhanced when you're playing a sectional game. And I went to Park Tudor Friday night to watch those games. And, Covenant Christian beat University in the semifinals with an amazing performance from Vivian Half, 30 points, 8 rebounds. And when I talked to the coach after last night's game, Jalen Bradshaw, she said, yes, that was a focal point. And they managed to hold her to only, I think, 2 threes and 6 total points. So, this is not just a talented team, a good team, but a very smart team too, who, understood the assignment, did what they had to do, and now they're sectional champions. So I got to make sure I'm shouting out Heights and Sheridan too, because they both had fantastic seasons, and hopefully they're not done yet. Same for Noblesville.
How about Vivian from Covenant Christian, the 8 3-pointers to knock off University, a huge comeback from Covenant. And I mean, after losing to them like 60-20 or something crazy during the regular season, like I talked to Covenant Christian's coach after the city tournament, and he talked about how he didn't think that score was quite indicative of the gap between those two teams. Like he didn't deny that University's, the team to beat in that section until they're not, which obviously changed this year, but he was curious to see how his team responded, and they responded in a big way. And it's the confidence thing again. I think it all gets back to that. It's kind of the theme this time of year. And they had to have confidence going into that game against Cathedral, 4A team in the city semifinals. They had it, and they played with Cathedral till the fourth quarter. And then you see that where they're down late, find a way to come back and beat University in that game, which is pretty cool. And then talking about Hamilton Heights, Richie, and we had that pulled up. That was pretty tenuous. They were down there for a bit, and then Cameron Runner and company, they find a way, and now they go on to regional with a chance to get back to semi-state.
Yes, I do want to mention also that Runner had 28 points. So, I mean, she's, talk about another beast, I guess.
Special player. She's coming in close now to she has a chance potentially to challenge Sydney Parrish's record for all-time leading scorer in the county, correct?
Yes. Let me do the math really quick. I think she is at 1915, and Sydney's record is 1925. So, she could very easily do that at the regional.
Good stuff. Well, Richie, thanks so much for stopping by with us, buddy. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. That was Richie Hall. Now we're going to bring on Justin Sokeland. He was down in Bedford, North Lawrence for one of the night's more surprising results. Justin, how about those Stars, man? What is it now? 13 straight sectional championships with last night's win over Jennings?
Yeah, that's 13 in a row, Hank. And it was at Floyd Central, by the way, which is an hour-and-a-half drive 3 nights in a row. So I'm joining you on 4 hours of sleep and no coffee. So I hope you appreciate that.
I do. It means a lot that you would do this for me and for Courtney and Danny.
It was a tremendous game. It really was. As you know, Jennings won the regular season game pretty handily at Jennings. So it's a little bit of a mild upset, but I tell you what, you never discount the heart of a champion. And B&L showed that, even though they've only got 2 returning starters from last year's state championship team. Those 2 girls played tremendously last night.
What if you could just talk us through? So it came down to the late, and Madison Bailey for Bedford North Lawrence had a huge game. I saw career high in scoring, correct?
Yes, and that's one of the things that B&L was counting on for the rematch. In the first game, Jennings won that one 58-41. Madison was 0 for 10 and just missed a lot of easy shots. So that was one thing they were counting on. And she came through with a tremendous game. She had 17 in the first half when Jennings was hitting everything they threw up. And, when the smoke cleared in the first half, Jeff Allen said, hey, we felt pretty good because we were only down 3. And that was all because of Madison Bailey. I mean, she was, I think, 7 for 8 from the floor in the first half and just kept them in it. And the second part of her game which is often overlooked, but it can't be stated enough, is she is one of the elite on-the-ball defenders and off-the-ball defenders that I've ever seen. They put her on Julian Woodard last night, and Woodard, a tremendous player, she was 1 for 9. And she just, whoever they put her on struggles because she is just a tremendous defender. So between those two things, Madison Bailey was the MVP of that sectional.
Yeah, let's stay with Madison. I mean, it seemed like in the state championship game last year, Soke, that she was matched up against whether it was the Twins or Talia and really effective. You mentioned the 5 points that she held Woodard to. Just talk about for the Indianapolis audience, like this is something that is a regular occurrence on the defensive side of the ball for Madison Bailey, right? But you also mentioned her 17. You kind of transitioned it. Did Jeff say something to you about purposely trying to get her going? Because you made a point and kind of breezed over it that, Chloe was great when BNL went to Jennings County, but she couldn't really get going. Did they feel like Madison had to score to win the game last night, or just talk about that?
Yes, they did have to have some help for Chloe. In that first game, at halftime, Chloe had every point except for the basket in the last 30 seconds. And you can't win that way, no matter how good Chloe Spreen is. And she is unbelievable at times. You can't win that way. It's a team game. And they knew they had to have some help. And Madison Bailey is the girl that had to step up. And to make that point even more clear, she had a game like that against Jennings County. She had another game where she really didn't play well at all. But in the last 7 games, being a senior, she has raised her average. She was averaging 9 points a game, and now in the last 7, she's averaging, I think, 18. She has really come to play in the last 7 games. And in the sectional, you really saw that. She played tremendously well last night. She played well in all 3 games that they played. And that's a senior stepping up. That's a senior with experience, by the way, who's been a part of this ever since she got here. And with that Bailey name in the background, too, with a lot of expectations. But she has really, really played well in the last month.
Justin, what was the mentality like, the confidence level for Bedford North Lawrence going into not only Saturday night, but just a sectional tournament in general? Did it feel like they're kind of playing with house money at that point?
No, they felt disrespected, and that's kind of a card a lot of people play. But Chloe made that point last night, multiple times. Everybody wrote them off, and they were ticked off about it. Here you are, the defending state champion. You've won 12 sectionals in a row, and everybody's already given that to Jennings County. And I understand that. I mean, Jennings County had won that game handily. They had a 25-point lead at one time in that game, the first time. So there was no reason to think that they couldn't do it, that they couldn't win the second time. But, Coach Allen made the point, with me multiple times. The regular season is different. The sectional is the sectional. It's a totally different ball game, a totally different mindset. And BNL has that mentality. And they just hate losing. And especially Chloe Spreen just hates losing. So they felt a lot of disrespect. They played that as motivation, and they play harder. And no disrespecting anybody else out there. They play harder as a team than anybody I've ever seen. They play hard on defense nonstop. If you don't play for Jeff Allen. So they between those two things, they were extremely motivated, and they played defense like demons last night. Just ask Jennings County, because Jennings County was averaging 60 points a game, and they held them to 10 in the second half.
Unbelievable. And the thing is, like, obviously the regular season meeting will get a lot of attention, deservedly so, and kind of setting the stage for the rematch in sectional. But at the same time, from a Bedford North Lawrence perspective, it kind of felt like, not much else could have gone wrong for them in that game. So you clean up and fix a couple things, and suddenly you get what you got.
Yeah, and that's the point that Jeff made with me several times. It was like, hey, we couldn't have played worse as a team. Chloe played unbelievably well. She had 26, but everybody else just played, pretty badly. And to put it bluntly, they shot horrible. They didn't handle the ball. They had that deer in the headlight look, a couple of them, and they weren't quite ready for that, what was coming. And Jennings County had lost 25 in a row, and they were hell-bent to end that, and they did, and they played extremely well. But Jeff said, hey, we couldn't play worse. Madison couldn't play much worse. They shot the ball well, and he said, those things change when the tournament gets here. And you could see it last night. Jennings County came out on fire. They hit 4 threes. It was 18-9. And I'm sitting there thinking, here we go, because this is the end of this, this amazing run. And but the longer the game went, the tighter you could see Jennings County get, because they had given B&O their best shot and B&O wasn't going away. And then in the second half, when the shots quit falling, there you could see a tremendous shift in momentum, and you could see the look in B&L's players' faces like, hey, we've got this, because we've got them on the ropes.
Yeah, you've been around, obviously 13 straight sectionals and a lot of success. 10 of those are Jeff Allen's. You've seen, the state championship run when Damon was coaching them with Jenna and Dominique McBride and Alexa Bailey, Jory Allen winning Miss Basketball, the Carson Norman years, even all-stars like Chloe McKnight. Center that on Chloe Spreen a little bit and just talk about her progression through maybe globally the 4 years as she gets ready to kind of make another state run, and even maybe this year with graduating kids like Mallory Pride and Carson Norman, maybe how she's been different. But no one has a better seat to Bedford North Lawrence locker room than you. So talk about Chloe and share with our audience some thoughts.
Well, when she first arrived, she came with a lot of expectations, because I was told, here comes the next great thing. And, I'm jaded after 30 some years of this. I'm like, okay, whatever. I've heard that before. I've seen it before. But she came in with the greatest of expectations. And I'll be honest, she has not only met them, I think she's exceeded them. She's going to end up being the second leading scorer in B&L history, which, if you look at that list, is an unbelievable list. Now, could she have scored more? Probably, but it would have been to the detriment of the team, because she's been all about winning. And, as a freshman, she had other players around her that she kind of took a backseat to a little bit, and they had great success. But last year, if you saw the state tournament run that B&O made, and no disrespect to anybody else, those last 3 or 4 games were all Chloe Spreen. They won because of her, and especially the state championship game, and the Simmons State too. She was just tremendous, and I think she has met the expectations that were just a little bit ridiculous, but she's met them and exceeded them as far as I'm concerned. And she's been one of the best players that I've watched. And like that list you just said, there's been a lot of great ones come through B&L in the last 12 years, but she's right there near the top of it.
Wrapping things up here with Justin Sokeland. Justin, looking ahead now to Center Grove, the Bedford North Lawrence side. Did they say anything looking ahead to the regional matchup coming up, a rematch from last year's semi-state?
No, they were so focused on Jennings County. I mean, they had put everything into that, winning that sectional. That was a big goal for this team. They didn't want this streak to end on their watch. So, that was it. So now they're going to have to kind of refocus and regroup. I think they saw them in the summer, as I think someone mentioned that earlier. And, so yeah, they've got some work to do and some preparation to do. They do get a home game. And by the way, that was said a long time ago, B&O was going to host. So that wasn't something just come out of the blue, so B&O was going to host that. They just happened to win and be able to get to home, which is going to be helpful, because they play well at home. But Center Grove, just looking at their record and looking at some of their stats, my goodness, they're going to be a quality team, no doubt. So they're ranked number 2 for a reason. So B&O is going to have their hands full. But I'll say this, again, you got 2 seniors that just don't know what it's like to lose, and especially the last couple of years. And so they're gonna be a tough out, no matter who they play. They're gonna be a tough out. They're not the best team I've seen. That goes to Lawrence Central without a question. I mean, they have talent that's unbelievable. But when you've got one of the best players in the state on your side, you've got an advantage.
Good stuff, Justin. It's Justin Sokeland, WBIW.com, covers Bedford North Lawrence like nobody else. Justin, it was a pleasure having you on. We appreciate you coming on 4 hours of sleep and 0 coffee.
Well, hey, I'll have a seat next to me on Saturday. If you're coming down, just sit by me, okay?
Good stuff, buddy. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thanks.
Take care. Justin Sokeland with us. And now we bring on Victoria Jacobsen for another big upset from last night. Columbia City falls to Homestead. Victoria, I will let you take lead and just tell us what went down last night.
Well, hi. In the first couple minutes, it really didn't seem like we were going to see an upset at all. Columbia City jumps out to a 10-0 lead. Things don't seem to be going well for Homestead. They had at least like two inbounding miscues in the first 3 minutes. The crowd was, Columbia City has been doing a great job of getting really great crowds this season. We saw it against Norwell. We saw it again last night. That crowd was loud. They were hostile, not in a bad way, but in a good way. And yeah, Homestead, a team with four sophomores playing key roles, got into a hole and then chipped their way out over the rest of the game, and then came up big in the fourth quarter to knock out Columbia City for the 5th year in a row.
Can you talk about the play of Maya Epps for Homestead down the stretch? From the watching some of the game and hearing the interviews, like the words that were used, that she was cold-blooded down the stretch. So you were there. What would you have to say about Maya Epps?
Oh, that's exactly the right word. And we've seen that from her before. And yeah, she had let me look right. She had 9 of her points in the fourth quarter. She went 3 for 4 from the free throw line in the final minutes. Homestead as a whole went 9 of 10 went 9 of 10 from the free throw line in that final minute and a half to make sure that Columbia City could not come back after Homestead had gotten themselves a little bit of a lead there in the fourth quarter. Yeah, Maya played great, but I think that what was really exciting about that team and really exciting to see was that she wasn't the only one hitting those big shots. During that fourth quarter, when they, took the lead for the first time and then built on it a little bit, they got big shots from Whitney Ankenbrook, who's another sophomore. Emma Royce, who's the only senior in that lineup. She was out at the beginning of the season rehabbing an ACL. And last night was the first night that she was able to play without restrictions, as many minutes as she needed. And so everywhere you turned, it was a different member of that Homestead lineup who was getting a big basket, getting a big rebound, getting a big steal. And so, yeah, I think I don't know how you can be anything but thrilled if you're a Homestead fan.
I'm going to ask a Columbia City question, and we'll I certainly unpack the Homestead side of things. But, I mean, this is now 20-3 2 years ago, 20-3 last year, 22-3 this year, with Homestead knocking them out of the tournament for the 5th consecutive season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the mood there? I don't know if there's any way to put that into words, but that's gut wrenching, Victoria, right?
It has to be. I actually didn't get a chance to talk to them last night because we were trying to get to all of the Homestead players, which, takes a while as everybody's cutting down the net. Yeah. And part of it is that, you are running into a Homestead team that over the past couple of years, has had, Ayanna Patterson, but, yeah, that must have been just absolutely devastating, especially because in many ways, this was supposed to be the year. They still have Addison Baxter for another year. She's just a junior this year, but so much of the rest of that lineup was seniors. They have been playing together for so long. This really did seem like this had to be the year to break through, especially while, Homestead had a whole bunch of sophomores, and this might have been the opening for a while.
Yeah, how did Homestead respond? Because, they lost to Snyder when we spoke a few weeks ago. Then they lost at Warsaw, where Warsaw went off from 3, right? And then they needed double overtime to be Northrop coming into sectional. Obviously, things turn when you're able to pick up some momentum with there. But what have they seen differently, or what's been changing for them, since the postseason started?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, Emma Royce, she's their only senior on the roster this year. And, as you would expect, Coach Rod Parker talked about how she is an extension of him out there on the court. She is their senior leader. This was the first time that she's been able to play unlimited minutes as much as they needed her out there. And I think that really showed. During the first half, they really were not rebounding really well. In the first couple of minutes, they weren't really doing much of anything particularly well, but she's out there. She's a calming influence. And especially as we got into the second half, she was the one who really turned around that rebounding situation. She was the one who was making sure, if there's a loose ball, nobody is going to be fighting for that more than I will. And she's, one of the ones who really got that situation turned around.
Sorry, Dan, I thought you were going to.
No. Sorry.
In terms of environment there, Victoria, I know we talked, you touched on it a little bit, but just in terms of atmosphere there, was it packed house, just bonkers loud?
Oh, yes. There was, if there was maybe a seat or two here or there, but you're going to have to make some new friends to go sit there and across a lot of people. I don't know. It took me about 6 to 7 minutes just to walk into the gym. That place was absolutely full, and that's not surprising at all. Homestead has always traveled very well, and it's not too terribly far from Homestead to Columbia City. Columbia City has had a great gym multiple times this year. The one thing I will say is I don't know if it was quite as loud as it was at the very end of the Norwell game, which was the de facto conference championship that came down to 2 late free throws by Dakota Hubble. But I talked to the Norwell coach a couple days ago, and he said that that's maybe the second loudest game he's ever been in. Maybe a regional once upon a time was ever louder. So, that is a hard place to come into and play. But I do think that Homestead kind of neutralized that in a way, because by falling behind really early, slowly chipping away, that made it so that they gave their own pretty substantial section of fans. They had their own student section there, gave them a lot of opportunities to get really excited there in the fourth quarter. And I think kind of, even maybe turn the tables. Not that they're, everything that went Columbia City's way, that gym was excited, but I think in many ways they kind of made that place their own.
Was there a point in that first half or during that comeback when you could kind of feel the tides turning a little bit, when it kind of felt like, uh-oh, here we go?
I think, well, again, it was very slow. By the end of, by halftime, they were down by 4. I think that in some ways I was actually at the media table was actually right in front of the Homestead parents section. And you could kind of hear them say, hey, if we get it down to 5, if we get it down to 3 in the first half, that's a huge win for us. You feel really good going into halftime. You come out, they were down by 4. That's manageable. And you could tell, especially in the third quarter, Columbia City only scored 7 points. Molly Baker, who had started the game with 3 straight makes, she was 3 of 4 in the first quarter, practically unstoppable. She just, misses a couple of layups that she usually makes. Addison Baxter, by my notes, she went 1 of 5 in the fourth quarter. I don't know if that was them getting a little tight, if it was just that sometimes that's the luck of the draw, but you could kind of see that they were very, very comfortable in that first quarter. And then all of a sudden it's, things were a lot tighter and the shots just weren't falling. And Homestead was being so much more aggressive on the rebounding. And it really did seem at that point that Homestead definitely by the third quarter and certainly by the fourth really seemed to have all the momentum.
Yeah, there was a critical stretch, Hank, down that Homestead was down 5 in the second half. And I thought this was the part of the game that had the best flow to it. Moments before a really nice spin move by Maya Epps, she picked up her 3rd foul and Parker decided to keep her in the game. But there was the apex of this moment, and it didn't seem like it at the time, but there was a scrum and Baxter ends up picking up her 3rd foul. And Amy actually reaches to sub Baxter out of the game. And only at that point in time did Parker sub Epps out of the game. So now you have this stretch in the middle of the third quarter of a very tight basketball game with Baxter and Epps both on the sideline with foul trouble. And Helsum hits a 3 and then gets a mid-range jumper, goes on a 5-0 run. And then Mollering gives them their first lead of the game on a layup. And it's very ironic because Epps was awesome, especially in winning time, especially in crunch time. But it was this middle kind of stretch in the third quarter where Helsum had a 5-0 run and Mollering with Epps on the bench. And I just thought it was a really interesting kind of, trust your players moment. And Parker pulling Epps out of the game when back to match Baxter's minutes, I thought was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. And that did not necessarily surprise me because Helsum has had a lot of pretty significant games herself over the course of this season. Maybe she doesn't have as many of the highlight moments as Maya Epps does, but I don't think, like I said, the Homestead parents were kind of sitting right behind me. I didn't get the impression that they were surprised by that moment, or that they felt like that wasn't something that was in the cards, while Epps was on the bench for just a short spell.
Vic, I have one last question before we let you go. So there, it's tied going into the fourth quarter. You talk about Epps and what she did in the fourth quarter. I think you said that she had 9 points. Courtney, you'll love this. Parker set 3 high flat ball screens for Maya, and she got 3 switches and penalized the switch 3 times. So out of that 9, 3 of them were just high ball screen switch actions. To kind of spin that forward, Vic, where I'm going with this is, now you have Epps and a matchup against Lily Graves, who is kind of another one of those kind of ascending players who might be the best player in the class the same way Maya Epps is. Was there any conversation with the Homestead kids about the McCutcheon matchup, or did Epps say anything about Lily, or is there anything like that?
No, unfortunately. I think I'm trying to remember. I'm not even sure if Maya if I had talked to her, or if I had even heard what the final was from that game yet. But so they were pretty much focused on that moment and celebrating there. Because I think in many ways, it's kind of funny to say because Homestead has won so many sectional titles, but I think that was a pretty special one for a lot of them. So they spent a lot of time on that Columbia City court after the game. And so, by this week, they'll definitely turn their sights more to that, but we didn't get a chance to talk about that and that matchup coming up.
Great stuff. Well, thank you, Victoria, so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking again next weekend after McCutcheon Homestead and what happens over there.
All right. Well, looking forward to it.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. Victoria Jacobsen of the Journal Gazette here. We have 6 minutes before I bring on another Sokeland. Yeah, I mean, we should at least touch on and address. I want to spend more time with it, more than 6 minutes. Let's talk about Center Grove Mooresville. I was referencing, to Franklin Whiteland, a game that came down to the wire. Danny, you had a chance to watch it, so we'll save that one for after we talk with Kyle. But Center Grove Mooresville, Center Grove just handles their business, and now they roll into that game against Bedford North Lawrence on the road too, no less.
It's just the most BNL thing ever to get that game at home. Sokeland talked about, the summer matchup. Bedford North Lawrence beat Center Grove by 14 in that summer game. So again, we ask questions like, is that everything? No, but it's also not nothing. And I think a mindset of Bedford North Lawrence, I think we kind of go back to just the winning pedigree. Like, Center Grove has to be like, wait, we have to go play on the road against BNL with a Miss Basketball, candidate on that team. They have to be like, what the heck is going on? But, from a mindset perspective, I think what that win does, and just the historical success they've had against Center Grove, they're not going to be scared of them at all. Like, just at all. Where other teams, they just kind of worry about them. You mentioned Franklin just kind of not being worried about them, but Bedford is definitely one of those teams.
The thing, though, too, with Center Grove, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I'm terrible at my job, but I mean, Center Grove had to go on the road to beat Mooresville, and that's not an easy place to play.
Yeah, that's true.
So I suppose for them, this is probably nothing. If anything, they seem like a team. They're just so experienced. They probably embrace it and find a way to make it a positive, And that's something that I want to touch on here over these last 5 minutes is we texted about this last night, but there's one common thread between Noblesville, Bedford North Lawrence, and Homestead. And that's they've all done it before. They've been in that moment and they've succeeded there. And I think that experience is something that maybe I personally undervalued or didn't think about as much coming in. But in hindsight, I mean, that's a huge thing. Just knowing how to win those games, knowing how to perform, how to respond in the pressure. And, it's one thing to say the things, but having done it before, I think that counts a lot. And that's something that really stood out to me as I thought about those 3 games specifically. And I'm sure you can apply it to other places as well.
Well, let's apply it to Bedford North Lawrence, right? You have Chloe Spreen's years, okay? But you have these program kids like Madison Bailey, we talk about, and she's a big part of the game flow, the strategy, the scout, and all of that stuff, right? But let's not forget that, Carson Norman and Mallory Pride was there. I think they overlapped with an Indiana All-Star. I think they might have even overlapped with regardless. But the names are endless. But that winning pedigree, like the role players and their performance in these basketball games, they've seen it before. And maybe they've just seen it sitting on the end of the bench, not to suggest that Madison Bailey was ever sitting on the end of B&L's bench. But the point I'm trying to illustrate is this. That winning pedigree is important because how the decisions that you make in late in basketball games, it has to come from somewhere. And how many times do we see? I mean, Bedford North Lawrence could have just said, hey, look, I'm out of this, man. Chloe, go win us a basketball game and go do it. But no, you have kids like Miley Sherrill, making big basketball plays and getting big rebounds and Nykirk. Chloe Spreen was really good last night, but she wasn't great. And we talked about it leading up. She had to have help. So I think some of that winning pedigree just comes from just watching.
My screen reloaded there. I apologize if I glitched out. Can you guys hear me okay?
No, you're good, man. I got you. Courtney, you can unmute when you were getting ready to talk. Courtney.
Yeah. So I geek out over the mindset stuff. And when you're a part of a program that has a winning pedigree, you've watched it from the time you're little, you're a part of it, you've been like when basketball and that you're a winner and you've done it time in and time out, game in and game out. In the summer during the actual high school season, like that stuff changes the biochemistry of your makeup, of your body. When you experience that, like you are forever changed. And so when you're in those situations, you respond. And so even Chloe Spreen, she doesn't have a phenomenal game, but she has an okay game. Like those players that are around her are feeding off of her energy. Like Chloe is a winner and she is effective. Even if she's not scoring and she's getting to the line, she has to hit 12 or 16 free throws during that game. Like she is impacting that game by her presence and in those timeouts, in those things. And you give me any kid you give me a Reagan Wilson, a Jordan Poole, a Chloe Spreen, a Lily Graves, kids that just know how to win at this time of year, man, they can put a team on their back and they can take them on a really fun ride in the state tournament.
Yeah, and that's what's unique about Homestead as you talk about the seniors, as Victoria talked about it. They have a lot of underclassmen, sophomores making plays there, but those are kids who grew up around the program, seeing Homestead, and you have a veteran coach there who's done it before. So, and those sophomores did it last year, obviously, like Danny was talking about as freshmen. And it's just fascinating to see how all the mindset stuff comes into play here. Next, we're going to bring on Kyle Sokeland, our second Sokeland of the day. Kyle was down at Evansville Harrison last night, where Evansville North picked off Evansville Central 52-46. Kyle, I'll roll the ball out to you and let you lead us off with your thoughts and takeaways from that game.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me back on. To say it was surprising, even North would say they were shocked about what happened this week. Because, they graduated their two best players from last year. Their next one up got hurt in the first week of October on an ACL tear in practice. They lost 7 in a row to end January, and then they just beat possibly the co-favorite on Saturday night to win the sectional. Just an overall team effort from the Huskies because, frankly, I don't even know what they expected, honestly.
Yeah, I have a question for you about their coach, Tyler Choate. He's got to know him over the last couple of months, quite honestly, through the relationship with this podcast, honestly. But you mentioned the 7 straight losses. They weren't favored going into it. I think Castle had won, 5 of those sectionals. I think Tyler has one of the sectionals, but he seems to be somebody who, like Will Stahl or like a Stephen Thomas, is just kind of one of those like coaching stars. But talk about him and that the mindset, to use that word again, that he instilled in that group, because if Cinderella is in this tournament, maybe it's Tyler Choate's Evansville outfit that's wearing the slipper. Talk about him.
He's been here for 8 years, and that's coincided with my time in Evansville. So, frankly, I think before he got here, not to disparage anything that the previous coaches did, but it was kind of on a downward run. They've won. He's the winningest coach already, and even in program history, even though 8 years only in. They just maybe have one or two dips where they just try to reload for the next class. But this year, I mean, he said they were competitive in that 7-game stretch to end the season. They just didn't finish. And that was expected with a younger team that has to play 2 freshmen in the top 6. Others that just weren't on those teams the last couple of years that won 17, 18 games each year. So, I mean, I've always been impressed with what he's been able to do, especially with a group like this where coaches can be down on themselves and really just not sure what to expect. But whenever that player got hurt in October, Evie Sale, he was joking with me, I don't know if we're going to win 5 or 6 games just because of how important she was. But these players stepped up tremendously last night, and you had career nights from a couple of them and just some that just grew up.
And then defensively too, what they did, I'm looking at your story here. They hold Maddie Shirley to just 13 points, 11 rebounds, no points after halftime too. I mean, that's really impressive to do that against a player that caliber.
Yeah, well, it was no points in the third quarter.
I'm
not sure. I might have. It was a long night. I might have written something wrong, but yeah, for one, they tried to front her with multiple defenders, help backside, but it just felt like she didn't get the ball much in the second half. And when she did, this is basketball, the shots just didn't go in. Shots that you think, oh, she makes those all the time, those mid-range jumpers just off the backboard or just rimmed out. But more importantly, she did not have a rebound after this at halftime. So all 11 came in those first 16 minutes. And when you stop her, you have to have the others hit threes, and Central did not hit a 3 after halftime. So just slowly but surely, the lead just trickled away in North. I think, in my opinion, the key was they finally hit shots. It was already a thin, talented freshman, but still a freshman, hit 3 threes off the bench in the second half. Aaliyah Epps, I think she's had 41 points all season, scored 10 last night.
Wow.
I mean, I even told that to her, and she's like, I know. I don't know what happened. But yeah, stuff like that. I mean, just everything just fell into place in that over the last 2 quarters.
So looking ahead now, I mean, North has another massive mountain to climb with Franklin, another one of those teams that's considered, in the conversation for a state championship. Did they talk at all about that matchup and just kind of embracing that underdog mentality, underdog role?
I don't think so, because, I was chatting with Tyler after the game. He was surprised that Franklin only won by 3. And he was also, we talked all the time, but he was also shocked at the B&L score. So they were so focused on this week. He said he told his team constantly 3 nights in February, because just how much they went through this year, just to even have a chance to make this weekend. There's no way they were looking past it, because not even one of the players joked that maybe only their parents and a few other classmates thought they could win last night. So I'm not sure what to expect from Franklin. I know they're really good, and their record reflects that, but you never know. We've seen weirder things. We saw weirder things this week.
Good stuff. Well, Kyle, what do you have coming up this week on the Courier Press?
Just more basketball, man. It's a lot this weekend. Just probably look ahead to the regional. I know we've got 5 or 6 teams left. North, Gibson Southern, and they play Washington in a rematch from the conference game. South Spencer made their first regional since 2006. Who else won? Bar Reeve won. We don't have anyone else up in the area in 2A since North Knox lost. So That's unexpected, but it is what it is. So hopefully we'll have more good basketball. We'll at least have one team in that semi-state round with 2 PAC teams playing each other at Crawford County.
By the way,
was that a surprise, the Linton Miners knocking off North Knox? I mean, certainly it's an upset by record and reputation, but deep down in those parts of the state, Jared's won state championships like not long ago, like 3 years ago. Did that play out as a surprise?
A little bit, just because even on Friday when I was at Gibson Memorial, people were behind me trying to watch the North Knox South Knox game on my computer. They were really I think everyone around here was still so focused on that game that Linton kind of just went under the radar, even with Brady Chambers, who had 33 last night. Just for whatever reason, and I know coaches wouldn't have done this, but just the common fan was so impressed and focused on that atmosphere from Friday night and that just showdown in Knox County that maybe they just slipped their mind. I know North Knox struggled to score last night, so it wasn't just Brady just winning a game on her own, but a little bit in my opinion, because I really thought if the South Knox, North Knox winner could have had a path to Indy, but I mean, I respect Linton's program. I remember watching those teams a few years ago when they made those runs to state.
Yeah. Typical trap. I mean, it's science.
Yeah. Good stuff, Kyle. We appreciate you joining us, buddy, and best of luck this week. I may be seeing you here next weekend if you're up in Bedford.
Yeah, maybe. It's one day at a time, man. I just try to get through one day.
By the way, Kyle's ability to rattle off all of his regional winners like that is really impressive. Like, that astounds me. Like, I struggled to even name just like the 4A teams who advanced last night. So Kyle's ability to keep all of that straight is impressive. So just wanted to shout that out.
I think Kyle has a 4. I think I see a Star Wars and a Rock. I've been staring at these posters behind him. Star Wars and the Rocky poster behind him. Like, that dude has that on his wall. It doesn't surprise me. He just rattled those off.
Yeah. I'm giant nerds in my house. Definitely didn't get it from my father, so I don't know where that came from.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Kyle. We'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
All right. See you guys.
Just before you move on, Hank, just kind of a funny little tidbit. Like, Tyler texted last night after they won. This is the coach of Evansville North, excuse me. So after they won the sectional title, he texted and thanked us for not picking them as kind of motivational banter and some bulletin board material. So I promised him on text that I wouldn't pick him again in the regional. So I'll go Grizzly Cubs all the way with that one.
Way to go, Courtney.
Hey, that's what I'm here for.
Speaking of those Grizzly Cubs, my goodness, that was interesting last night. They had to battle back. I'm gonna pull up I wrote about it a little bit. I have sectional surprises, by the way, up on IndyStar.com. Just log in and you can check that out. But in a sectional, we talked about it going in. We've talked about it on text, but it felt like the road was set up really nicely for Franklin. Opening night was Shelbyville executing a perfect game plan to limit them to a season low in points and I think just a season low in field goal attempts as well. And then Saturday night, Whiteland puts up a great fight, takes him down to the wire where it took some free throws late by Brooklyn York and then a go-ahead three-pointer by Lauren Clem with about 70 seconds left in order for Franklin to advance. What do you take away from that game, Danny? I think you had a chance to speed through the film before we jumped on here.
Yeah, Whiteland led 40-36, and they had a gorgeous offensive possession where they got the ball in the middle against an odd front zone, and then just a reverse pivot, a little dive, and a strong side layup. And that's what kind of ignited the York free throws that you mentioned, and then the Clem 3. But the story of the game was the 2-3 matchup zone that Whiteland played. And that's a counterintuitive thought, to take a 3-point shooting team and play zone. A very counterintuitive thought. But I think that's what I would do if I would play Franklin. It presented like a 2-3, but the matchup almost happened as if it was like a 4-1 zone. And they just shaded different areas of the 3-point line. But I think it was really interesting. I don't take a lot from Franklin. I mean, they move right. They're sectional champs. Each game is kind of its own little individual episode. But I think it was interesting because with a team that does like to shoot the 3-point shot, you would think that you want to check them man and chase them off the line. Whiteland did the opposite. So it'll be interesting to see what Tyler does against them. If they advance past them, we'll see who they match up against. But yeah, they were down 4. Under 3 minutes left. I mean, it was crazy. I thought it might happen.
Cool. Kelly Bergerson's doing some great things over there at Whiteland. They had the winning season last year. Then this year they get all the way to the sectional final after not winning a game in sectional since 2017. So it's really impressive for them. And then for Franklin on that side, you kind of wonder, how does a close call like that, a really good game by an opponent like that, how does that launch a team moving forward? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Courtney, for you, when you were going on your run at Oak Hill, did you have close games like that in sectional or anything like that?
Yeah, we had quite a few. We had some overtime games against Taylor Titans. They had the Oliver sisters, the Wall. They had a really good squad, and we hosted a lot during that time. So they were home games for us, packed out gyms. Like, they were Hoosier Hysteria classic games. And so getting out of that sectional, it was tough. But once you get out of that sectional, it was almost like kind of a relief. And then you get to really narrow in and focus on, and especially with the regional being a one game, like, that changes the tide. You focus on one game to get to semi-state now. So it used to be when we played, it was 2 games in regional. So I think getting out of those tough games in sectional where they're close, it just keeps building in your DNA of winning those tough games, and you can ride that confidence all the way through February Madness.
Well, if Josh was here, he would say all these kids do is win. And so, you could point back. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Clem hit the big 3 you mentioned. York hit the big free throws. York also had a big steal. Kimbrell had a monster 3. Late in the game when they were at the free throw line trying to ice it away too, Erica Buning gets an offensive rebound on a missed 3. I just named their starting 5, and they all made big plays down the stretch in order to get that done. So in the end, Franklin is going to have kids with big game DNA that are going to make winning plays in winning time, and that's who they are. So we'll see how far that can take them.
My internet's being a little shaky here. Some other scores as we kind of whip it around a little bit. Speedway last night won their sectional, as I try to find the information, but it was their first sectional win in quite a while for Speedway. So cool run for them. They pick off Purdue Poly, who was kind of like the first year darling last year in Class 3A with the run that they went on in their first year of tournament eligibility. So that's a cool story. Courtney, I know you wanted to spotlight a big game up in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I got to shout out the Eastbrook Panthers. They won in 4 overtimes sectional championship last night over Blackford, which was revenge. They had gotten beat by, I think, maybe it was like 14-ish, just a few days, January 26th. They had lost to Blackford, came back, beat them in 4 overtimes, sectional championship. So shout out to the Eastbrook Lady Panthers moving on to regional.
Absolutely amazing game. I saw some of the highlights there down the stretch. Just an incredible marathon. Speedway, by the way, that was their first 3A sectional title and the first girls basketball title, sectional title in 11 years. So the spark plugs are moving on. Indian Creek, Bishop Chatard both also advanced in 3A to set up a rematch between them. It seems like they've met, I think, the past 2 or 3 years, be it in regional or semi-state. Those are always really exciting games, and it's going to be interesting to see. We'll dive into it more later this week, but it'll be interesting to see Faith Wiseman versus Anna Caskey for Bishop Chatard and some of the other matchups there. That one will be really fun. 2 really well-coached, very talented teams there for a spot at semi-state. Danny, what other games jumped out for you?
Pike.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Keith Hollins and Pike. This is unexpected. I called Evansville North the Cinderella, but maybe Pike. They have the reputation and they've had great players there that maybe they don't look like your prototypical Cinderella, but that's everything that they are. These are young. Sanaya Smith, Kamari Booker, Alexis Warren. These are not household names, and quite frankly, neither is Keith Hollins. But that's who I want to talk about, because this isn't just a guy who just coaches a team and won sectionals. Like, this was Andy McGuire's right-hand man when he led Zionsville to the state championship, loss against Lawrence North when they had Maddie Nolan and Richardson. His point guard on Keith Hollins' AAU team when he was involved on the club circuit was none other than Reagan Wilson. Like, he's coached Riley Makalewski, Ellery Minch. Ironically, he's coached Aubrey Booker and Audrey Ane. He coached 2023's Miss Basketball, Layla Hull. Like, I can go on and on, but this isn't just a guy. And now he's a sectional champ. And I'm really happy for him. I'm really happy for Pike because in the matchup against Franklin Central, I just feel like they were counted out a little bit. I think they're really leaning into this. And just kind of a side note, and he's fine with me sharing this, but I mentioned that we have a relationship on the last pod, but they carried around when that run with Maddie Nolan and Zionsville, they carried around this little suitcase, and in there was like all of these symbols of their season. Like there was like a chain, there were like some letters that I think they wrote. There was like a hammer, little things like that. He sent a picture of that briefcase with Zionsville's logo on it. He sent it to me this week, and it still had the security tag on it from Gainbridge that year. And he said that he opened it up for the first time since 2019. He opened it up for the first time on Saturday morning. Just kind of a cool story. But Pike is going to play Plainfield, and one of them is going to be the regional champ. So congrats to Pike.
And what's the run? You mentioned them kind of being a Cinderella. I mean, before you get to Franklin Central, you have to talk about them beating Roncalli and taking out Roncalli.
Yes.
And they did so with their defense, a team that they lost to pretty handily, 62-39 at the beginning, or they won Friday 62-39. They forced 23 turnovers. They outscored Roncalli 43-19 in the second half. I mean, that's unbelievable. And you could see, I haven't seen Pike a ton this year, but the thing that always stands out to me is that Lawrence Central game in the county tournament, when they're getting beaten up pretty well, pretty handily by a really good Lawrence Central team we'll talk about here in a second. But they kept playing hard, and the kids kept fighting, and they kept believing. And it's one of those things that, sometimes, just kind of, cliche, whatever. But with a team like that is so young, that speaks a lot about the coaching and just like, the character of the kids is probably the wrong word there. But you know what I mean? Just like the gumption of them to fight through something like that. And here they are, they've stuck with it. They've gone through a really difficult schedule, taken some tough losses, but they stayed together. And you can kind of see that indicated in that game. And now here they are. They beat a really good Roncalli team, and then they pick off a Franklin Central team that, coming the end of the year, was kind of supposed to be where Pike is now. They were going to be that team that kind of came out of nowhere, is off the radar, and won it. And instead, Pike battled back from down 8 in the final 3 minutes, to create in the final 3 minutes to win, which is some huge play after play. And then they dodge a bullet at the very end with Franklin Central's 3-point attempt at the buzzer rimming out. But just a great story, great work, like you said, Danny, of what Keith Hollins is doing over there at Pike, and what his second season over there, and a really cool team to follow as we move along here.
Well, let me add to one of your points. I mean, you said something really smart about the Lawrence North, game. But, what's unbelievably ironic is I'm going to talk about Pike versus HSE in the last game of the regular season after the draw came out. We had talked about that as the narrative out of that basketball game was HSE and where they were, and we missed it. Oh, it's terribly ironic is that was actually the maturation and the culmination of Pike peaking. And I think Keith actually maybe casually said this on text, but that was the turning point of their season in a loss on the road, 74-71. But he had some kids that were growing up in that basketball game, and boy, did they ever grow up. But it's amazing, and a lesson to us all, that just stay in your lane, run your own race. And, they weren't worried about HSC. They were worried about Pike. And now Pike is playing for regional. So good for them.
Yeah. I remember us talking about that too. Like, wow, they put up 70 points there. Pike did. I mean, that's impressive. And it's interesting that he mentioned that too as a turning point in their season. You can see how that fits in there. The team that they're playing, Plainfield, they handled their business against Terre Haute after knocking off Brownsburg the night before. So it'll be Plainfield versus Pike in the regional. On the other one, Josh was texting us about it last night, but Julie Shelton and Mount Vernon, I mean, they're death taxing Julie Shelton in the regional to get them through again. They knock off New Palestine last night to set up a match with Lawrence Central, which finished the job that most expected them to, especially after they won Friday night against Lawrence North. The Bears, they had their hands full against the Warriors early on through the first 3 quarters, but a big finish in the fourth quarter. They pulled away to win to advance the first time since the 80s. Now they're going to go for the first regional championship in program history, and just a fun team to watch. And we talked about them on the last show, so we'll save more of the LC talk, I guess, for the regional preview. But just an impressive run, and just such a big cast of characters, a team that's defined, I think, up front by the Lampley girls and Layla Abdurakeeb and some of the other players. But, Garrett's coming up big, and just all these different players now are starting to step up, and a team that's grown up a lot since the beginning of the year over there. Danny, I'll pivot to you as I scroll through Harrell and let you pick the next game. Or Courtney, if you'd like one.
Well, he's thinking one game in 3A that I was looking through scores. Bremen won in overtime by 2 points over Tippy Valley, which that's a revenge of earlier in the season. Bremen had lost by like 13 to Tippy Valley. So that I just want to shout out the Bremen girls on their sectional win.
Yeah, and then staying in 3A, Benton Central knocked off West Lafayette by 5. That sectional is just so deep and so talented. Benton Central gets out of there this year, 48-43 over West Lafayette. Tip of the cap to West Lafayette for a great season. And yeah, Benton Central's moving on. Norwell's through with a 17-point win over Belmont. And then we mentioned Hamilton Heights hung on for a 37-36 win over Jay County. And then the last area team that I want to talk to, at least from 3A, Danville, over Lebanon, 53-14. So Danville's moving on, and they'll play Speedway next Saturday.
And I think my parting shot would be this. Leading up to this, I think I tweeted it, 85% of the teams are done now. Okay, so which is an unbelievably high percentage and a very low percentage of who's around. Okay, but because of the competition within each sectional, we haven't talked about South Bend, Washington. We haven't talked about Lake Central. We haven't even really talked about Lawrence Central, Center Grove. Like, there's some of these like heavyweight championship level teams that can make deep runs and be regional champs that we haven't really, even talked about. But they're still in this tournament. I mean, we're not talking about them because they weren't upset. So, I think when we preview and do our show this week and we preview those basketball games, they're going to have their time. We're going to talk about them.
Yeah. And then one game that we missed on Friday that I wanted to mention, Lafayette Central Catholic picked off number 4, Carol Flora. They held Allie Harness to 13 points on 4 of 13 shooting and kept fall senior Madison Wagner scoreless, which is a huge accomplishment. That was a big game for Carol Flora after losing to Lafayette Central Catholic the year before. But LCC gets it done, and they end up winning the sectional Saturday. They're another one of those programs that's just always there. They're always, it seems like, at least since I've been here, they're just always there. They're so consistent, so steady. So big win for Lafayette Central Catholic as they moved on. Lapel rolled 62-21 over Winchester. And Eastern Hancock 67-11 over Cecina to move on as well. I think that covers all of our area teams. Bethesda Christian is moving on from Class A, as is Eminence. And Jackson Dell is through with a win over Oldenburg Academy. Lanesville Borden, a big Class A game that we should mention. I said there were no clear-cut favorites, but now that the dust has settled on sectionals, I think you can probably point to Lanesville as the favorite there. They had a really tough matchup in the sectional championship game with Borden, another of the top teams in Class A. But now that Lanesville's through there, I think they've kind of established themselves as a championship caliber team, sort of the favorite there. But Bethany Christian, the team that met them last year in the state final, is through as well after they won their sectional. So the Class A race seems like it's taking shape a little bit faster than everybody else.
Yeah, Lanesville got rid of Borden. I mean, Borden has 2 Division I prospects on their team, Riley Rarick and Ava Wheeler. Lanesville just, I mean, so they're complete down there.
Yeah, really impressive group they have down there. Angie Hinton in her 6th year at the school. Any closing thoughts from the two of you before we get out of here?
Nothing from me. Court?
Nothing for me. I'm excited to break down these regional matchups.
It's good to see you last night, by the way, live in person.
Yeah.
2 weekends in a row now, Court.
Yeah, and it was nice meeting you in person last night too, Hank.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a fun game, a fun night, but the best part was meeting Courtney and then seeing Danny.
Yeah.
Sabol
Sure,
was good for us. He was in St. Louis,
And he'll be back, by the way. So for people that watch that are, oh God.
Where's Josh?
Terrible without Josh.
And I can't wait to get the breakdown on the St. Louis food, because I know, Hank, that you gave him some recommendations. So we'll have to break down that. The matchup between Josh Sabol and St. Louis food will be fun.
We got him that, and he went down there for Mardi Gras weekend, which, if anybody's familiar with it, the Mardi Gras scene in St. Louis is something else. It's second only to New Orleans. So good stuff from that. But we thank you all so much for watching. We're going to be back. We're going to tape a regional show. We might do that live. We might pre-record it. I'm not sure yet. We'll have that. We're working on some other things too, some different things with our preview coverage as the season wears on. But thank you all so much for watching. Check out IndyStar.com for all the coverage. Thanks everybody who joined us, and we'll talk to you again soon.